Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks all, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to the conference. I'm not going to talk about how robots are taking over the world. That was the last talk. This talk is going to be a more relevant directly IT talk, but what I want to talk to you about is cutting through the hype of 5G. And what I mean by this is, if you can't pick up an IT trade rag without hearing about 5G. And 5G is incredibly important. But I want to put it into context of how it's going to be used and how we're going to see it first emerge in the industry and what we're doing and what we're building towards this, and also what we're driving in open source and standards bodies. And so although you've heard or have heard many, many talks and read the trade magazines that 5G will cure hunger, it'll cure cancer, it'll do everything, let me put it into context of really what's emerging. The reason why I want to talk about this point of history and where we are with the transformation of cellular communications is that what has been defined so far is what is relevant to creating a macro radio, the big radios on towers, and that's it. And so I'm going to talk about what's coming, what services, and what's actually going to be delivered. One reason why I'm focusing on this are some major themes that we're seeing. In the US, right now, roughly 50% of all enterprise employees do not work in an enterprise setting. They're working mobile, they're working from home, coffee shops, hotels, whatever the case may be. Second, inside an enterprise network, there is a complete separation between the credentials, identity, and policy associated with the employees as they work in an enterprise versus a cellular network. And I'll get into more detail there. This has led to a complete disconnect between what an enterprise needs and what a service provider may deliver with respect to cellular communications. So with these big pieces, these are the big problems that we see need to be addressed and need to be addressed through the notion of 5G. So very, very simplistically, the situation we're in traditionally with an enterprise architecture is that the security perimeter is defined by the real estate and geographic presence of that enterprise, meaning the security perimeter is at the branches or at the campus, and that's it. So when I want to log in remotely to Cisco, I create a VPN tunnel, it goes back to campus, it goes through our security perimeter, and it goes off to the internet. Whether I'm using a browser or I'm using Salesforce or Autodesk or Workday or any of these services, it all goes through our campus-based perimeter, and that's pretty much the definition of most enterprise architectures as well. And because of this, and also because of the separation between the enterprise network and the cellular network, when I'm mobile, I can't get the same services or security or policies or segmentation that I have on the enterprise network. I can't get that on my mobile, in my mobile life. Using my mobile phone, my pad, my laptop, it doesn't matter. I can't get the same services, security that I get when I work at Cisco and on campus. So to put this into a further complex state, everyone in this room is aware that all of us are using cloud-based services. That goes without saying, whether it's 365, or as you can see here, it's Salesforce, Workday, Autodesk. Any of these services, they're running out of a cloud. And as those SaaS-based applications continue forward, they're coming out of multiple clouds. So things are getting dramatically more complex very, very rapidly, but the architecture of the enterprise network is still campus perimeter based. And so if users are not on campus, and again, by the end of this calendar year, it's expected over 70% of the enterprise employees are not going to be on campus, and the applications we're using are running out of multiple clouds, how are we going to be able to create a secure environment for those enterprises and those employees, and can 5G help us get us there? From a Cisco perspective, and providing a lot of infrastructure for the internet, have to stop thinking about transport and start thinking about the applications. And it's also beyond the applications. It's a user's identity, the device they're using, the location they're using that device, and the applications that they're trying to work with. Those four variables are the four main variables that now compose the policies, including segmentation and security, that we need to deliver off the internet. And right now, the internet is constructed out of the architecture where it's the IP address of the device I'm using and the IP address of the destination I'm going. And so fundamentally, the architecture of how packets are routed, flows are routed, services are delivered, and how security policies are maintained fundamentally needs to evolve. And it needs to evolve very rapidly to meet these new architectures. So just to make my point, and there are some numbers behind this, you can see the number of applications headed to the cloud, and the fact that roughly 50 and soon to be 70% of the workforce is going to be mobile or using mobile devices. The applications we're using are not only cloud-based, but they're becoming more demanding based upon really just the experiences that are being created for a user and the devices and the mechanisms necessary that they're going to use to do their day-to-day jobs, and I'll discuss that in a second. Nonetheless, when we're working for the company that we're employed by, we want the exact same user experience and ubiquitous nature that we have when we're just acting as consumers. So we've done a number of studies just because of our presence in the industry that in fact the number 1 and 2 issues associated with access by an enterprise are security and segmentation. And segmentation really just means authorization or access to a service, whether it's a database, it's a financial application, or manufacturing floor, point of sale data. That's really summed up in the industry term of segmentation, but you can think of it as authorization. And the ability to create policies and forwarding policies based upon those 4 attributes: identity, device, location, and application. So 5G has promised a lot of things to the industry, and it's promised a number of these capabilities that you can read, and I believe that a lot of those capabilities can be used, and I'm going to show you how very shortly. The next piece to note, and certainly we see this in the US as well as continental Europe and across the globe, that many enterprises are finding that the overhead of running their own IT systems is very, very challenging. Not only are they incredibly complex, it's difficult to maintain the engineering talent and resources to be able to run that themselves. And so they're looking for a number of these pieces to be offered as managed services by a service provider. So the consumption model and the manner in which that these are going to be deployed need to be able to also work as if they were as a service. The control and visibility to the services and the ability to program a cellular network with enterprise policies is a cornerstone of this. And then, of course, the mobile network is a day-to-day tool. As I take a look at the attributes of what we can get from 5G, it boils down to 2 main things that are defined today for the macro radio. More bandwidth, of course, low latency, and that low latency enables us to do mission-critical operations. What this turns into is more bandwidth is always great. Low latency is equally a critical tool, but the ability to bring and use cellular communications indoors to run manufacturing plants, retail operations, healthcare, et cetera, become now available. And really where I'm headed with this is that the notion that there is an indoor Wi-Fi network, perhaps an outdoor cellular network, those days really need to be over. And we need to have a heterogeneous network where the actual spectrum that we're using to communicate and get on the internet is not what's defining the experience that you're going to get or the security. So when you take more bandwidth and low latency, ultra low latency as the 2 pieces that are coming from 5G, as well as a potential ability to create slices or traffic engineered bandwidth across a cellular network, these pieces are fantastic and a long time coming. But you cannot build a business just on those three pieces. You actually have to take a look at what is now available from the radio network and what's possible on the entire end-to-end network architecture and the services be delivered, and then you realize that the combination of those elements is really a viable and useful definition of 5G. Heterogeneous networks, meaning Wi-Fi, wired, and cellular, can be operated and managed as if it's one spectra and one access technology, and that all of the features and parameters and services that exist on an IP network today are available to that on that cellular network as well. And that's what I'm really showing here, that it's a combination of the attributes of the new radio with the capabilities of an existing IP network that become critical. So what we've seen emerge are really several enterprise verticals that are coming out, that are emerging in the industry that can dramatically and rapidly use multiple radio access and in a combination with these services. In particular, retail, healthcare, transport, energy, transportation, and traditional carpeted space. The one reason why this is coming up, and I'll talk about these in the examples, is that it has been impossible to reflect the enterprise policies or the authorization policies, say, in a hospital or in a manufacturing plant from one network onto the cellular network. Yet when you take a look at these enterprises, you will find that they're a Noah's Ark of technology. And what I mean is there's two of every kind of networking and access technology that's ever been invented, yet they all are run independently. So one of them, again, the main attribute of 5G that I'm carrying forward is heterogeneous networking is key. So in manufacturing, going into a manufacturing plant, you'll find many, many different types of networking technology. Whether it's, again, Wi-Fi, or it's Bluetooth, or it's even X25 is there, as well as a variety of CAN buses. The need to be able to attach these also to a cellular network is key. So in this case, it's actually a simplification using the 5G architecture to have all of these networks combined together and managed and operated with a single security policy and authorization policy on top. In healthcare, across the globe, what's emerging is complex in-home healthcare. The goal is recover from a sickness, injury, or illness at home versus in a hospital. But to do complex in-home healthcare, we need to be able to attach perhaps a variety of machines that would now be in a home setting versus a hospital setting. A nurse practitioner who would come to your home today may arrive not only to assist you, but also to read the data off of those machines and get instruction from your medical team. These pieces can be dramatically improved. They can be improved by enabling both cellular and Wi-Fi communications inside the home, such that in an IoT world, those sensors which are sensing you and your health are available back to your medical team, perhaps in a hospital. Moving to the next case of the energy and energy grid, the rest of the world is in a different state than the nation of Iceland, where in many cases, smart grid technology is just emerging in those countries, including in the US. The ability to automate a power substation, the ability to regulate the energy across the grid and understand the usage patterns of energy across an entire nation are just emerging. And so these become additional sensors that need to be able to use cellular communications as well as wired communications, as an example. And in retail, and the notion of smart retail, inside a store and micro-localization, and the ability to provide the smart shopper who is using both a combination of a cellular application on the mobile phone in their in-store shopping experience, These use cases not only are emerging, these use cases have emerged on us in the industry, but it is very challenging without a notion of localization, the identity of the user, the device they're on, and then if they're using the stores application as well. So the 7 pillars that I believe that are necessary to enable this technology are really here today and are being built. And coming from CES, where we heard the Consumer Electronics Show, where we heard quite a bit about 5G, and in 2 weeks at Mobile World Congress, which is going to be all about 5G again, there are really 3 main things that are necessary to enable this transition, and a 4th one that is emerging on us immediately. So the 3 that are necessary are, almost without saying, combination of indoor cellular and Wi-Fi that are managed and operated as a single network. Second, the ability to use your identity credentials like dward@cisco.com on both networks. That sounds obvious, but that is not possible today. Your laptop is known by your MAC address, which is your Ethernet address, we'll call it that, and your cellular phone is known by your SIM card. I need them known by my enterprise credentials. In addition, when I use different applications, 365, Salesforce, as I mentioned before, I use, like you, different logins for these different services to reflect my personalities that I want to use on the internet. I need a federation of these identities, which is what's being built into open roaming, that allow me to use different applications on the same device with different credentials and get different security services for each of those pieces, or each of those applications. The third piece that's necessary to make 5G work in the enterprise setting, in addition to indoor cellular and the use of enterprise credentials, is the ability, as I've said, to reflect my enterprise policies onto the cellular network through an API gateway that an enterprise IT engineer can put in very specific policies and can be delivered from a service provider. Those are the 3 almost obvious, completely obvious technologies that are necessary, that have to emerge for 5G to be useful. The 4th one is a practical one. And the practical one is the ability to take a VPN client on your mobile device and have a programmatic control plane that can link together identity, the device, the location, and the application, and push a policy of where to steer that traffic. The architecture of the internet today is relatively simplistic. The internet starts at the gateway you're attached to. And although this is obvious to say, it's really quite transformational in the architecture of the internet. The internet starts on the device that you're using. Again, that sounds very obvious, but all the policies today are really dictated by the gateway you're attached to. So by being able to have different tunnels and different paths to the internet of where where your security treatment is going to occur, you can use your device with multiple personalities. You can use your device with multiple applications. And my email will go directly back to Cisco. My Salesforce work will go directly to the Salesforce cloud, 365 the same way. And just by the ability to steer traffic differently based upon those 4 attributes, I now can do infinitely more, and in particular have a better experience and have a secure experience as well. So I'm going to talk about these in just a little bit more detail. Bringing the cellular radio indoors is not a new idea. But what's different about the construction of this time is that the cellular network will actually be a part of the enterprise network. And that's through, I could go through many, many hours of discussion of how the architecture of this is done, but when we separate out, when we take the mobile gateway and deconstruct it between a control plane and a forwarding plane, which sends the packets onto the internet, and put that forwarding plane into the enterprise network, I now have the ability to consider it the same as Wi-Fi and wired networks. By adding by adding an API gateway that I described earlier, I have the ability to take how I'm using my enterprise controller and reflect those policies directly into the cellular network as one network. And as I mentioned before, that's what's being constructed today. The open roaming piece, just a quick repeat, is when I can have and use my enterprise credentials and have that apply across wired networks, Wi-Fi, and cellular networks. And I can use different identities on that device to get different security treatments and different experiences. And this has now been, for example, at Mobile World Congress the last couple of years. As a consumer, what we're going for is the ability for you to roam onto a Wi-Fi network, onto a cellular network, onto another Wi-Fi network, and never have to log in to authorize access to that particular network. It is just seamless roaming across the different locations that you wander through, work through, etc. And this Open Roaming Federation, for what it's worth, is based on something called Hotspot 2.0, which has been in the industry for a while, that we've put into the cellular network as well. The next piece is network slicing. And network slicing for 5G is the ability to traffic engineer, meaning reserve a certain amount of bandwidth in the cellular network. What this really also means is that I can segment that cellular traffic such that I have the ability to get to a financial database, but I don't have the ability to get to point of sale. And so this segmentation can be reflected based upon the Active Directory role I may have in my organization, or upon other databases that have a linkage between my identity and my role in the organization. As I mentioned, mobile SD-WAN is a fundamental change to the internet architecture by having active endpoints. And that active endpoint has access to, today, on your mobile phone, both Wi-Fi and cellular access networks. But you can't use them at the same time. So we've invented a transport protocol that allows you to use all of the access interfaces you have, Wi-Fi and cellular, at the same time. And what it does is it measures the bandwidth and latency of those links such that you are getting the best possible experience and the most possible bandwidth off of your devices as they exist today. This notion of an active endpoint also really means that not only are you measuring what you're getting from the network, you also have the ability to tell the network itself what that device sees from the network such that it can self-tune itself and to be able to move other traffic around the network to have critical bandwidth available for certain applications. And so as I move forward, that consistent mobile experience is really what we're going after. Don't backhaul your traffic back to campus to get to the internet. Allow direct access based on user, device, location, and application to steer that traffic and to steer it also where security treatments can occur as necessary. So we're going to get there by taking some concepts of zero trust networking that's emerged in the industry, and many of you may have read some of these papers. Zero trust networking coming from Google is a very important concept. But unlike Google, many enterprises do not have a full proxy in front of their resources, databases, and applications. So what architectural construct can we use? Well, what we need for a mobile user is an abstraction of that perimeter that was on campus to one that's running out of the cloud. And so moving a security perimeter into the cloud is what I'm describing here with using Cloud Edge. And I'll show this in a little bit more detail. So the notion of being able to send traffic to different destinations off your mobile device or off of any sensor that has multiple access technologies means that I need to be able to abstract that security perimeter in line to the services that I'm trying to get to through a secure internet gateway, apply firewall rules, intrusion detection, DDoS prevention, et cetera, et cetera. Delivering this out of the cloud really provides a fantastic abstraction. And that means that with a global footprint, wherever you roam on the planet, into whichever cellular network or Wi-Fi network, you will go to the closest possible cloud service point on your way to the SaaS-based applications. So when I bring this all together, the network as it exists today is roughly what I'm showing here, where, again, you're using a specific access technology through a very specific perimeter and edge services that exist on campus to get to any applications on the internet. As we take a couple steps forward, we realize that the network architectures we have today are not fit for purpose for what we need, and we need to bring in this notion of heterogeneous networks and the application of a cloud-based security model to be able to allow that free roaming and get the best user experience and still do it securely. So what we've built, for what it's worth in our portfolio, we have an enterprise controller. We have this API gateway. We have a mobile gateway, and we can reflect those segmentation, authorization, and services from the Wi-Fi network onto the cellular network, and are building out all that I've mentioned with respect to the cloud-based security perimeter, the mobile agent that allows multiple tunnels and the linkage of the 4 variables, and thus the architecture of 5G is more than the macro radio. It's a combination of the attributes of the new radios that are coming with the capabilities of the IP network that exist, reformulated into new architectures. And in my opinion, as IT professionals, that's what we need to pay attention to with a 5G architecture. So what I've tried to discuss with you today is that 5G does solve business problems. It's much larger, and there's much more to it than just the hype that you've been hearing, because the hype has been focused only on the macro radio. The enterprise and business verticals are the most immediate target for 5G. And I say this with confidence because 5G radios are not deployed. You cannot buy a 5G-enabled mobile device today, but you can take the concepts of where 5G is going with LTE and adding in the new 5G handsets as they arrive this year and into next year, and build out more powerful use cases that have more functionality, greater user experience, and in fact are lower cost by using these foundational technologies that I mentioned. And just a quick repeat, the seven foundational technologies I have up here, 3 that are mandatory to emerge over this year and next year, and the 4th of mobile SD-WAN is something that we've been demanding and desiring as consumers and as enterprise employees for quite a long time. So there's much more to 5G than the hype, and there's actual things you can count on in 2019 and 2020 that are going to emerge, in addition to the macro radio. So thank you very much for your time today.